In this video, I'm going to start with the absolute most basic foundations of flirting, stuff you can use even if you're a total beginner. And then I'm going to go all the way up to some fairly advanced techniques. But regardless of your skill level, I suggest you watch the whole thing, because even if you're advanced, you're probably making fundamental mistakes. And even if you're a beginner, you can learn from every step of it. So watch the entire video. Every single level of this video is going to apply to you and is going to help you in your game. All right, without further ado, let's get into techniques. First thing you need to know about flirting is, while there are lots of techniques, the most fundamental thing about flirting is an attitude. It's a decision that you are going to have a fun conversation. It's a decision that you're going to keep things light. It's a decision that you're going to let the girl know that it's man to woman. It's a decision you're going to put in the effort to be something more than just boring. If you haven't decided to put in a little oomph to your conversation, if you haven't decided to go beyond boring and logical, then all the techniques in the world aren't gonna help you, because you're simply not gonna use them, you're not gonna put in the energy, and even if you do use them, you're not gonna deliver them in the right way. In fact, even if you didn't know any flirting technique, you could still be flirty. If you look at the way that young children play, they tease and flirt to a certain degree organically, naturally. They have like their sing-song voices, they make fun of people, they give people a hard time, they're playful about things. They never learned flirting formally, they never learned a technique, but they do it somewhat naturally because they are in a playful mood, because they've decided to have fun, and because they have a lot of energy. Kids seem to have tons of energy, right? So anyway, what I want you to understand more than anything else is that the first step in flirting is deciding to flirt. Deciding that you are not going to be a prisoner to a boring conversation. Deciding that you are not going to have the logical conversation to nowhere anymore. You need to make that decision. You need to get to the point where you would much rather get rejected or offend someone than hear, "Nice to meet ya," after another boring logical conversation yet again. Next, I'm going to give you a few definitions that are going to be very useful in this video. There are 3 words I want you to understand. The first word I want you to understand is premise. Premise is anything that is man to woman in nature. So basically a shorthand for this is, if you're saying something to the girl that you would never say to a man, it's probably premise. Next definition is a tease. A tease is when you are playfully giving someone a hard time. So you can do this with a man or a woman. Men tease men all the time. If you ever see how people on sports teams interact or people in school interact, guys are giving shit to other guys all the time. Guys in frat houses give shit to other guys. It's not sexual. They're not trying to sleep with each other. They're just joking around together. They are teasing. But what they're not doing is flirting. Flirting is when you take premise and tease and put it together. So if you have something that's man to woman and you're being lighthearted and teasing, you're being lighthearted and giving someone a hard time, you put that together, now you have a flirt. Okay? So all 3 of these are useful in game. If you have premise that's not teasing or flirting, it's still useful. If you're teasing, but it's not premisey and therefore it's not a flirt, it's still potentially useful in game. And flirting, of course, is incredibly useful in game, and that's what we're kind of going for in the end. But I want you to understand these 3 words and understand the distinction, because the different techniques I'm about to give you all are focused on one or the other or the third of these. So some are focused on being premise, even if they are not necessarily teases or flirts. Some are focused on teasing, and some are all the way to flirts. But all of them are useful techniques to add in if you're having flat, boring conversations. The simplest and most basic way to make a conversation man to woman and potentially slightly flirty is just simply to give girls compliments. So if you're having a boring conversation, that it's a decent conversation, it's just not man to woman, it's kind of flat, and you throw in an occasional compliment, doesn't even have to be that related to the conversation you're having, but now you're having a good conversation with someone and they're reminded that there is a man to woman aspect, that may already be enough. And this is in fact how guys with no game whatsoever flirt, right? They have conversations with girls that they like. Hopefully they're at least on a friend level with them, and then they give an occasional compliment, and then in the end, maybe they ask them out, and hopefully it goes well. And that can be enough. It's not particularly sophisticated. It's not a particularly great approach, but it can work. It's certainly better than nothing. Now, the downside of just giving compliments is each time you're giving a compliment, you are making it man to woman, but you're also putting the girl on a pedestal a little bit. You're elevating her relative to you. So there's a tendency, if all you're doing is compliment, 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 you may be giving too much value away. You may be elevating her relative to you, and you may be creating a situation where you're not the high value person in the interaction. However, again, you have at least made it man to woman. And if you have these compliments, but you offset them with other things, like maybe having a negative opinion as well with them, which we'll talk about as a specific technique when you put the 2 together. But as long as you balance your conversation so it's not compliments all the time, you can definitely add in some compliments, make it man to woman, and not give too much value away. So this is a viable strategy, if not an optimal one. So again, it's not flirting, but it is moving things in a more man-to-woman direction, and it is something you can add into the conversation to improve it in general and also improve the likelihood of it becoming man-to-woman or even flirtatious. If you'd additionally like to add a teasing vibe to your conversations, but you're not very good at teasing yet, a nice shorthand for teasing is just to act more cocky in general. If you take on a frame or an attitude that you are a high-value guy, that you are attractive, that you are good at things, that you are better at things than her, that you're going to beat her at games you might play. These types of attitudes are cocky attitudes, right? And cockiness, it creates a bit of a back and forth. It creates a bit of a competitive nature. It also creates this idea, at least this frame, that you think you are kind of good. You think you're something special. And when you create a frame like that, she has to do one of two things. She has to either accept your frame, in which case you're becoming someone of value, or she can counteract your frame, contradict your frame, in which case you end up getting shit tests or banter. You end up in a conversation that has more emotional spike than a flat, logical one would. So taking on a cocky attitude in general leads to a teasing nature of the conversation, even if you're not doing overtly teasing lines. So far, everything I've mentioned are ways of sort of subtly nudging the conversation in the direction of teasing, flirting, or man-to-woman, and hoping that it goes there. If you want to be really good at game, though, you're going to have to learn to actually take it there yourself. At some point, you're going to have to learn to use actually teasing or flirting lines, which means two things. Number one, you need to have the balls to deliver them, and number two, you need to be able to come up with them. Now, the easiest way to learn these two things is not to learn them both at the same time. So the easiest way to learn how to do teasing and flirting lines is to actually steal somebody else's lines at first. Is to use lines you know are good, so that way you only have to think about saying the line, not coming up with the line and saying the line. So using what we call canned lines, using lines that you've heard me say, you've heard other people say, lines that you've said before that have worked for you, that you've written down and remembered, and you kind of regurgitate them at the right places, that is the easiest way. And so if you want some examples of canned lines, look at any of the infields that I ever have had on this channel. You'll see some canned lines. And then also I have a special document. It's called Steal My Lines. I'll put a link in the description. You guys can check that out. It's some of my absolute best lines you guys can steal to get started. So you can check that link below to get some of the lines I use if you want to just put those into the conversation right away. But again, the idea of this is we're making it easier. Instead of you having to figure out, I have the balls to say it, this is where I say it, and this is what I say, we're taking away the this is what I say restriction, right? You don't have to come up with something unique to say. You already have what to say planned out. Now you just have to decide when to say it and have the balls to say it. Once you get comfortable saying that, now you can go a step further and come up with your own teases. And by the way, as you get more comfortable with teasing and when you're in the right mood, you will occasionally come up with your own teases organically. This is because teasing and flirting is just mimicking what high-value, confident guys do. So when you're feeling high-value and confident, you may already come up with some of your own teases and flirts without ever even being taught the format. If you do that, enjoy it, know that you did a good thing in the conversation, but also make a note of it, because your own teases and flirts can become your future canned teases and flirts for you to use yourself later as well. So now finally, how do you come up with your own teasing and flirting lines? Because this is where I want you to get eventually. I want you to become so fluent with teasing and flirting that in the moment as you're paying attention to the conversation, you can come up with the line and deliver it right then and there with perfect timing suited to the conversation you're having. That's the ultimate goal. But in order to do that, as we already talked about, you need the balls to deliver it, you need the timing to deliver it, and then you need the line itself. So you can work on the balls and the timing first, and the lines second. Or you can work on them both separately and eventually they'll come together. In any case, here are some of the best formats for flirting lines. Format number one, the push-pull. Push-pull basically means you're giving a positive and a negative in quick succession, or a negative and a positive in quick succession. This balance of a compliment and something more negative, or a negative and something that gives the value back, puts the girl on a bit of an emotional roller coaster, and it allows you to give the compliment you'd like to. Remember, we talked at the start about how compliments make it man to woman, but they give your value away. However, if you give the compliment, but you also give a negative right next to it, you haven't given your value away because it's still balanced. You can also do sort of what's called a delayed push-pull, or a separated push-pull, where you do a compliment and then later on in the same sentence or a few sentences later you have a negative spike, or if you have some negative spikes and some positive spikes mixed in throughout the conversation. That will achieve the same effect of having man to woman in the conversation, not giving your power away. However, it won't have the same impact as a push-pull that's right next to each other, because here you're losing the comedic format. When you have like the setup and the punch, the juxtaposition of the positive and the negative, it's much more emotionally impactful than if the positive and negative are separated. Both work, but when the two are next to each other, they work better. The next flirting format is exaggeration. This is where you say something in a ridiculous, exaggerated way that clearly can't be taken seriously, and that can make it playful, it can make it fun, it can also allow you sometimes to put information into the conversation that it wouldn't be safe to say in a logical way. So for example, you could say something like, wow, so we're both attractive people. What do we do now? Is this the part where we get married and have 2.2 kids, or should we start with a drink first? All right, so should we get married and have 2.2 kids is clearly an exaggeration. Nobody's doing and saying that right after you've met someone. But by exaggerating it and being playful about it, you're able to put out this idea of should we have a relationship together without actually logically asking should we have a relationship together. So you're being flirty, you're being light, and that allows you to bring up these man-to-woman frames in a safe way and a fun way. The next flirty format is what we call a mini cold read. Mini cold read basically is where you notice or observe something about the girl and then you sort of exaggerate in a playful way or make a playful interpretation of it. So a quick example of a mini cold read might be something like, let's say you see two girls do something at like the exact same time together. You'd be like, oh, you guys are in such cute sync. You guys should start like a girl band together. Another teasing format is the future adventure projection. And again, this is a little bit like exaggeration, where you're going to talk about something you and the girl might do together in the future. And sometimes you're going to say this in a silly way, sometimes long-winded, sometimes you can even put a push-pull in with it. So for example, you might be like, oh shit, I guess we're going to have to go get married in Vegas. We'll drop into one of those Elvis chapels. We'll get it annulled tomorrow, though, and I'm going to take half your money. Something like that. It's a crazy, exaggerated idea of what you might do in the future. It is relationship-based, so it's man to woman. And then at the end, we'll get divorced and I'll take half your money is a little bit cocky. It's a little bit of a push-pull. So I'm putting all these formats together. But the future adventure projection is this idea of here's a thing we might do together in the future that is lighthearted and funny. It's not a serious plan. By the way, a future adventure projection is not maybe we'll go to a movie and have popcorn together. That's not exaggerated. That's actually asking the girl for a date. A lot of guys get that wrong. They actually project a real legitimate offer. The idea of these exaggeration humors is they should be exaggerated enough the girl knows you're kidding. Another great teasing and flirting format is assigning playful nicknames and or doing what's called callback humor. So callback humor is when there's a joke that you used before and then you bring it back up, and then obviously playful nicknames, it kind of speaks for itself, giving someone a playful nickname. So let's say, for example, there's a really hot girl and but instead of calling her by her name in kind of a teasing way, especially like if everybody else is from big cities, you're like, easy there, Iowa, right? Kind of in a teasing, condescending way because she's from a smaller state or something like that. Another example of callback here would be, let's say, for example, a girl told a story during the interaction about how she shoplifted or something like that. So you might call back and call her the criminal mastermind at a point later on to refer to her silly shoplifting story, right? So this is callback humor. You're being playful, but you're bringing back something that was said before in the conversation, which is personal. It shows you're paying attention, but it also is lighthearted, teasing, playful, flirting. So that is a whole bunch of formats you can use to tease and flirt, and a decent amount of examples. And again, if you want some more examples, you can check out the Steal My Lines PDF below, so you can check that link as well. But one huge point I want to make to you is remember where we started this video. Attitude is more important than the lines themselves. If you deliver a line in a way that's not playful, not only will it not work, it may actually be very weird and creepy. Right? I've seen guys say canned lines especially that are not their own, and they'll say them in this very boring, logical way. Instead of being like, oh my God, you're trouble, they'll be like,
you are trouble.
And I was like, what the fuck was that? Okay, so attitude and delivery matter a ton. If you're being uber serious and you're delivering a line simply to push a button and make it work, and you're not having fun in the interaction, the girl's gonna sense that, and she's gonna sense something is off. So more than any of these lines and formats, which you definitely should learn, it's the attitude, the desire, the decision to flirt and have a fun interaction that has to be the foundation to all of this. The lines only work once that foundation is in place. So these are a bunch of ideas of different techniques and manners in which you can flirt and tease. If you up to this point have not been flirting and teasing a lot, my recommendation to you is this. Start throwing in one or two of these in your interactions and just see how it works. Most likely it'll make the interaction better. If you notice that it is making the interaction better, or at the very least it's not making the interaction worse, you can add in a few more, and if that works, a few more, and a few more, until you notice you're getting diminishing returns. There is such a thing as too much flirting and teasing. However, most guys are so far away from it, they have a lot of room to grow and a lot to do. But if you have been doing no flirting and teasing, you don't want to suddenly turn 180 degrees and become a clown in set. You don't want to become this guy who all you're doing is flirting and teasing. The nice thing to do is to have a good conversation and let these teases and flirts be the spice. Let them be the nice emotional spikes that go along with a genuine conversation where you're really getting to know the girl. And over time, you're going to get more and more accustomed to them. They're going to become more and more fluid, and you're going to get a sense for exactly when to use them and when not to. So that's a little guide to get you started with flirting as a beginner. There are also tons of other flirting videos and, of course, general game videos on my channel, so check those out as well. And leave your comments, suggestions, questions below. I do read them even if I don't always respond. Thanks again. See you on the next video.